What's important to you? My mission is to ask as many people as possible this question, because I believe once you know what's important, you can design and build a life of purpose, meaning, and fulfillment. My name is James Dean. I'm a life coach, and I hope this podcast inspires you to uncover what's important to you. You can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at James Dean Coaching, or connect with me on LinkedIn. You can also learn how I can help you understand what's important at jamesdeancoaching.com. Today's guest is the Director of Building Resilience in Young Minds, an organisation that provides schools with fantastic mental health support for pupils and staff, and are passionate about promoting positive mental health in young people and developing lifelong resilience to cope in an ever-changing world. She has over 25 years' experience in the education sector, working as a secondary school teacher and a very successful head of year in an outstanding school. She retrained as a therapist and now has a successful private business supporting young people with mental health. She has worked in many schools over the last 10 years, and Building Resilience in Young Minds supports schools to help provide young people with practical techniques to deal with their mental health issues. Today, we find out what's important to Charlie Hartley. Hi, Charlie. Thank you so much for joining me today.
That's no problem at all. Thanks very much for inviting me.
Brilliant stuff. Really looking forward to chatting to you. So we're going to go straight into it. And the first question, as always, is, Charlie, what's important to you?
Well, I think it's a great question. So, what's most important to me is trying to support young people's mental health.
Okay.
So, it astounds me that 1 in 3 adolescent is now saying that they have a mental health disorder of some kind. Whereas 3 years ago it was 1 in 6. So how in 3 years can we be in this situation, really? So what's important to me is to build resilience in our young generations, and help them deal with their emotions and have practical techniques that they can use to help manage their emotions as they grow up. Our emotions change all the time, and if you know some skills that you can use to help yourself feel better quicker, then I think we're winning. And that's what's important to me.
Very interesting. That's just to go straight into on that sort of statistic you shared. We'll go into this whole space of it much more in a sense of why it's important. But just even that statistic you said, gone from 1 in 6 to 1 in 3, is that might be a lot of factors, but is that one of the pandemic is that the biggest impact that's probably had that on that statistic?
I definitely think the pandemic has had a huge impact on our children. I think it's the first time, well, actually, in the majority of our lives, where the world stopped, and the anxiety that rides around that. I remember at that time I was a teacher, and I remember with my year 11s at the time talking about coursework, and it was about this time, wasn't it? I think, I don't know, 30th of March or something. It wasn't very long ago. And I remember with being I was a DT teacher, and we're doing coursework because that was a majority of their GCSE. And I remember this young lady coming up to me and said, they're going to shut the school. They're going to cancel all GCSEs. And I was like, don't be ridiculous. They might shut the school for a few weeks, but not going to cancel GCSEs. And, we were all absolutely stunned. I mean, that's only such a small part of life like we knew it that stopped, wasn't it? And I think for young people, it was really like, whoa, hold on a minute. All these things I know that are going to happen that we have to do. It all stopped. And, and in a moment, in an instant, their world completely stopped. Their parents are going, whoa, what's going on? We're not going to work. We're all at home. We're all together, and don't get me wrong, there were some lovely bits for lots of people during lockdown too. But I think from an emotional perspective, I think it was really difficult. And I think for a long time, and maybe for the whole of this generation of those young people that were sort of, anything from maybe 10 to 18, anything through that age group, as they ride up through the years, I think we're going to be dealing with issues from lockdown for a long time.
Absolutely. And so in a sense, because you're saying then your background said as teaching, so is it sense of like was working with young people, I suppose, the first question, is that something you always want to do, regardless, in a sense of what the sort of area or such, or where it was?
I mean, I do love kids. I think they're brilliant. I'm a secondary school teacher, so older
Yeah.
kids I enjoy more. But that sounds terrible because,
Yeah.
but little kids, I don't know. It's just, I think teenagers are just wonderful. Their brains are
Okay.
fantastic and they're alive and they're all over the place all the time. And it just, interests me. So they say, don't they, if you don't know what to do, teach. And that, I hate that statement really
Yeah.
because teachers are wonderful things. And,
Yeah.
to be a good teacher, I think you've got to be quite remarkable, really. And actually, I did fall into it, but then I loved it. And then I was ahead a
Okay.
year and I loved it. And, I worked for 25 years as a teacher. And I loved the subject. I was a product designer, so I liked the kind of inspiration and the way kids' brains, like I said, are just
Mm.
innovative and they surprise you. And I love that about them. And I think when I was ahead a year, I think I noticed so much about even then, that was probably 12 years ago, the mental
Mm.
health, the way that we supported young people in school, I didn't really think was the best.
Yep.
Counselors are great and they do lots of brilliant things, but young people change all the time. They
Yep.
change weekly, they change daily, probably.
Yeah.
And talking about stuff, don't get me wrong, I spend my life talking about things. So I know it's got huge amounts of benefits, but I wonder with teenagers whether, or even younger children, whether that's the way forward with their mental health,
Mm.
and whether it would be better to teach them sort of resilient skills so that they can use them when they do feel low. Because it's not, as an adult, we can have days where we go, oh, I'm just not feeling very good. And, maybe that turns into weeks or months and we can then talk about those situations. But with young people, their brains, within a minute, they can, like girls in year 8, for example, they could be friends at break time. By lunchtime, they'll hate each other. And,
Yeah.
it's only a couple of hours and then their mental health's doing, whoa, doing this all
Yeah.
the time. So I think, it would be great to help support young people more. And that's sort of what happened. So I decided I didn't want to teach anymore. Like I said, I'd done 25 years.
Mm.
And, and during that sort of last 10 years, I retrained as a therapist and got really excited about the brain and learned
Okay.
lots about the teenage brain and why they do the things they do. And thought, do you know what? There's a real space
Mm.
here to help to educate young people about their brain, to figure out why we do the things we do. And then I've kind of pulled together different techniques, whether that's NLP techniques, CBT techniques, a bit of emotional freedom technique, tapping, in a strange, they're all quite weird, but I
Yeah.
quite like that. It's kind of like this, let's try this, see if it makes you better,
Yeah.
and giving them loads of different skills that they can then use to go, oh, this one really works for me. I really like this. And as
Yeah.
adults, we all choose to do different things, don't we, to make ourselves feel better.
Yep.
Um, and I love that sort of thought. I think schools are brilliant at teaching them lots of things about their mental health. They talk a lot about healthy eating, making sure you're
Mm.
sleeping, the food and all that stuff. But I'm not sure yet, as a society, we really talk or educate about our brain and
Mm.
why our brain does the things it does. Why
Yeah.
do, why are we scared of spiders, for example?
Yeah.
Why when we, you know, well, why do we get scared and our heart rate suddenly just pumps around our body and we're like, and our breathing
Yeah.
changes? When you understand all those things, I think it's quite exciting because
Yeah.
then you can be like, oh, okay, that's what's going on. Now I can change it. Now I've got the power to change it. So yeah,
Yeah.
and that's kind of what happened. So I have in the last, well, about 10 years ago, started kind of developing a package, like I said, with all these different principles involved. And it's just grown. And so I went and really phoned old friends and said, look, I've got this package. Could I come and try it in your school? And they were like,
Yeah.
yeah, of course, come in. And that was 10 years ago. And now I have a company called BRYIM. So we're called Building Resilience in Young Minds. And at the moment, there's 8 of us, soon to be 11 of us. We're all
Fantastic.
ex-teachers.
Yeah.
We're all trained therapists, and we all go into schools to provide therapy for young people. And whether that's doing big group workshops with a
Mm.
tutor group, for example, or whether we go and do a presentation with year 11s. Last week I was at a school in Bracknell giving doing it to the whole of year 11.
Yeah.
100 people at a time. We did it to sort of two sessions. And it's great because they're all joining in, they're all interested, they're like, oh, I
Yeah.
get it, that's really interesting. And we've had comments said like, oh, it's great, I've done lots of therapy in my life, with different types of people. Actually, I've got skills that I can really use now, and I really feel like
Mm.
it will make a difference to me from a day-to-day perspective.
That's
Yeah, so it's
interesting.
very exciting. And we do a
Yeah.
one-to-one program too, where we can do that in schools or privately. And
Yeah.
again, it's all about building resilience.
That's amazing. Um, one of the things there was coming up for me there when I was interested in the sense of just the longevity you've had in this career, in a sense you had 25 years within the teaching and then sort of 10 years or so of now what you've been doing more privately. I'm interested in the sense of from working with young people, in a sense of the advent of the explosion within the internet that which just about when I can remember going back to college that and you know how long it used to take to log on to the intranet for when I was in uni. Like, you'd be waiting hours just to get on, which sounds madness now. But the advent of that, and then the advent of the connective type of internet, social media, has it had the impact on young people that we're led to believe from just the quote unquote the news? Because you've been directly in there, you were there prior to it, and you've been through it. I'd love to know your perspective on it.
Well, I think, you brought up COVID, and actually, I think this is the other thing that has caused this
Yeah.
issue about 1 in 3. Actually, what other difference has there been?
Yep.
It's so astounding, really. I mean, of course, there's wonderful things about, the internet and everything that we are now able to do and find out about and connect with. Don't get me wrong, I'm not like, oh my gosh, we should never be, on the
Yep.
internet or anything. That's not me at all. But I think for young people, it's really, really difficult.
Mm.
You think about when we were at school, you'd be at school and there would be maybe some issue between a few people, and then they'd have a row, and then you'd leave school, and by the next day you'd have a bit of a headspace and kind of like, oh, well, we're all right. Yeah, we're all right. Okay, let's just carry on. Well, nowadays, you have issues in school, let's say, and you have a row with your friend over, the color of your pencil or something like that. And then through the evening, whether it's through WhatsApp, whether it's through Snapchat, whether it's through, other messages, and other people will kind of get involved, and it becomes such a huge issue that by the
Mm.
time you get back the next day, you really are in, as in the two friends are completely at loggerheads with each other, and it's much more difficult to sort out. I heard this interesting statistic recently as from a brain perspective, the fastness that people watch all the Snapchat, and how we kind of move
Mm.
past them. From a brain perspective, it's like a bus is coming to run you over. That's the
Right.
sort of emotional kind of what it does to your brain. So while you're there
Yeah.
just watching all these movies, because it's so quick, and I think most internet, I never know what they're really called, but the things we watch,
Yes.
um, we normally watch them for about 20 seconds, and then we move
Yes.
to the next one.
Yeah.
You know, in 20 seconds, doof, 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 and if you're
Yeah.
doing that, and I was with a young person, they're on their phone, when your phone tells you how much time you've been on certain apps,
Yes.
17 hours a day, this young person is
Yeah.
on Snapchat. And you're like,
Wow.
how do you even manage, how do,
Yeah.
she doesn't sleep very much, obviously, but how do you even manage to do that? But lots of young people are doing it all the time. And
Yes.
and I was talking to a person again who is very interested in the brain, and she said some young people that work with her, so sort of 25-year-olds, they're working. She has a space where you can go and rent space. They're working, but they've got their phone next to them too, and they're like watching bits as well as working. And it's like your brain can't do two things at once. I know we
Yeah.
all say, well, we can remember a few things.
Yeah.
You actually can't. It flicks between the two. And so they're doing that, they're doing that, they're doing that, and how often do we ever really give ourselves now, 100% attention to one thing? I'm not sure
Mm.
we do, whether it's an
Mm.
Apple Watch or whether it's, whatever kind of watch you've got. You're
Yeah.
always connected to, there's always another part of your brain going, oh, you've just got a message, or you've just got this, or you've just got this, or you need to do the internet, you need to do your emails, you need to check WhatsApp. It's so much pressure, isn't it? I think
Yeah.
absolutely it's had a huge
Mm.
impact on our young people's mental
Yeah.
health. And I saw Pink put a quote out on YouTube saying, I don't care if my child gets bullied. She's never having a mobile phone, and I wonder whether, we'll be looking back 20 years from now going, we're all crazy. Why are we letting our
Mm.
children have these things in their hand where they have access to them 24/7, where they have access to everything?
Mm.
Even when we put we try and protect our children and put the kind of parent
Yeah. Sort of boundaries on it, or
thank you very much.
reduce it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, reduce the time on there, or they
Mm.
have ways around it. And
Yeah.
honestly, I always it fascinates me how, in a way, I know it's bad, but how teenagers can be like, I've got this thing that I can get around that, and
Yeah.
and we don't, and as parents, we don't know at all.
Yeah. But because one of the things you were saying there, in a sense of, it's the thing. One of the things you said earlier about sort of working with children and say, or working with young people, especially that sort of teenage years, adolescence, is because they are so effervescent is the word that I could,
Yeah.
what you were describing them, and they're sort of like flip-flopping between ideas and thoughts and stuff. So when you're it, because that whole sort of developmental age of the brain just constantly growing and emotions being up and down at the best of times.
Yeah.
So then when you, as you say, then when you put in these devices that have all intents and purposes of keeping you on the device,
Yeah.
that's the whole thing, is to keep you engaged. So when
Absolutely.
your brain is sort of like running at 90 and then this thing is matching that, it is the recipe for disaster if the
Yeah.
thing is just staying on it, and then the impact that that has on that person. And do you, this is, I suppose, an add-on in a sense of the impact, and it says, is it relation to then what you're trying to work with people? Is it a sort of an increase in things like anxiety? Is it those sorts of mental health issues, or is it more, is it a spectrum of them, I suppose, is what I'm asking, the types of
Yeah.
challenges you're seeing with young people?
There's a couple of things. If I forget to come back to that, make sure you
Yeah.
ask me. But a couple of things. So in the teenage brain, so there's 5 years of adolescence that where our brain has huge amounts of progress and changes. And
Mm.
during that time, there's actually parts where the teenage brain, the consequence part of your brain,
Yeah.
isn't connected to the rest of your brain, which I'm like, that's quite cool. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
it's awful because,
Yeah.
then when we don't have a consequence, we're like, we'll be fine.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
but we say to young people often, oh, why didn't you think about what would happen? Actually, they can't think
Yeah.
about, for there's times when they physically can't think about what would happen if. And I think as adults and as kind of, supporters of young people, to be like, have you thought that if you do that, this might happen,
Mm.
and kind of being that leader in a space
Yeah.
of going, this might happen. Have you thought about that? Have you thought about that? And now they're saying up to about the age of 25 that our brains aren't really fully developed as adults. And I remember being 22 thinking, I'm not an adult at all. I'm
Yeah.
not sure at 25 I was an adult either, and maybe it's taken a long time to understand my brain and understand the things we feel and the things we do, rather
Totally.
than things sort of happening to you and you're like, whoa, what's happening? Well, this is so strange. But I think for teenagers that happens all the time.
Yeah.
It's just they're literally living in a space where like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And then all this pressure is on them for GCSEs, A levels, and parent pressure saying, oh my goodness, you've got to succeed in this world, you need to have a good job. And then then all the financial crisis and everyone stressed about that, and they're like, oh, well, what's the point? And then,
Yeah.
this world could stop completely as well, and you have to stay home. Oh, well, why do I bother then? It's really such an interesting message, isn't it, to those
Yeah.
brains that are just like, well, why should I bother? Like, well, it's going to all stop, or it could all stop next week. So what's the point? Going back to that whole COVID thing.
Yeah.
I just think the brain development of those years is so crucial
Mm.
that it is that absolutely affects their mental health, whether they
Yeah.
were involved with social media or not, or involved with
Yeah.
COVID, or involved with the financial crisis, whatever is going on. We're adding to that problem really.
Mm.
And like I said I'd forget where we were going, don't I?
No,
Tell
so
me what
like
you think.
yeah, so that was just interesting in a sense of the actual sort of degree of impact, in a sense of those young people, in a sense of what you're seeing, that sort of statistics of that, from that 1 in 6 to 1 in 3, like, is it the sort of full expanse, a sense of, you
Oh
say, of
yeah,
spectrum within mental health,
yeah,
from what would be considered sort of low level, not minimizing someone's thing, but to
yeah,
sort
yeah.
of real extreme?
Yeah, and I think you said in that bit, do I create anxiety? I
Yeah.
was like, in a bit of a I was like, well, hopefully I don't create
Yeah,
anxiety.
yeah, yeah.
But no, I know what you mean. Yeah, a full range. I mean,
Yeah,
I think every teen. So when I do, it's interesting because obviously I get from a private perspective, as in when clients come to my
yeah,
clinic, it's parents ringing up saying I'm desperate quite a lot of the time.
yeah.
There's a lot of children who are self-harming or feeling
Mm,
suicidal. That's sort of the one extreme of it.
yeah,
And working back through those problems is tricky. And I think, as much as the NHS tries to do a brilliant job, and, once you get into CAMS, which is the Children
yeah,
Adolescent Mental Health Service, um, they do a great job. But waiting, I've worked
yeah.
with people who are saying, I've been told I've got to wait 3 years. And 3 years when
Wow.
you're 14 is
Yeah,
a lifetime,
yeah.
there's so much going on. So we have a real need for more people to be working with our
Mm,
young people, definitely, whether it's in those extremes or not. But I
mm,
think even just generally, so we go from, like I said, the self-harm and the suicide,
mm.
and people feeling really depressed, all the way down to a young person just being able to do things like normal, doing all their activities, doing going to school, getting their homework done
Yeah.
and everything, but then this anxious feeling, this sort of underlying anxiety where our brains just, like we said, don't ever just stop,
Yeah.
and that's where our brains are like, whoa, it just feels like you want to explode because how often do children say, do you know what, I'm really bored? And being bored is a great thing sometimes because when you're bored, your brain's like, oh, and does boredom create creativity? Does it make you go outside? Does it do all these other things that maybe we're losing the possibility to do? And if you think about COVID, we had to stay inside, you had to stay in your gardens. Remember that time at the beginning where it was very much in your space,
Yep.
and if you're lucky enough to have a garden, great, but lots of young people weren't. And
Yep.
imagine being in a housed space in a flat, for example, and having to stay in that space 24/7, and then also you've got six brothers and sisters and you're all in that one space, and the anxiety of that. And I don't think children go outside very often, really. You think
Yeah.
about when we used to go and take our bikes out and, go to the woods or doing all that sort of stuff. Now young people often, right, we're playing on Xbox or we're playing on PlayStation, let's
Yeah.
get locked in. And, they're still socializing in a way, but maybe not getting the other benefits of being outside,
Yeah.
letting some of their adrenaline kind of burn away.
Yeah. Yeah,
Any,
it is. Yeah, no, it's an interesting thing because it's like, um I don't work with young people, and I don't have children of my own, so I'm very much out of the loop, if you know what I mean, in that respect. Once I left university, I left the sort of education system as well, in the sense of working with anyone and young people. Now I have nieces and nephews, but they don't live near me, and so I don't see them all the time. It's when I see them for visits and things like that. So it's what's interesting to hear, in the sense of like, it's not people say this is cliche, oh, kids aren't going playing outside, but it's actually true, is what you're saying. And that's, I find quite interesting, because one of the things you were saying there is like, and even if I go back to even just my teenage years, I don't think I got to think of my first phone when I was maybe 17, something like that, which seems mad now, but it was before then, in a sense. Even then, like, we were only just about using them. It's like, if you wanted to meet a mate, you just had to expect they turned up.
yeah,
Do you know what I mean? And it was like,
yeah,
we'll meet you at, you'd pick the point where you're going to meet, or you'd have them on a house phone and say, oh, I'm going to meet you at this point. But you didn't then check 2 minutes before you on your way. You just went.
yeah,
And sometimes they didn't show up, and you go, or sometimes whatever, or they were late or whatever. So you just had to deal with those things. And is it the fact that now there isn't the instantaneousness of connectivity has removed the potential for things maybe going there a little bit wrong. So
yeah.
when something does go wrong, they haven't a clue
Mm,
how to manage those situations.
yeah. I I agree. I absolutely agree with you. I think the resilience is not there, whether
Okay.
that's the young person's fault, whether that's parenting, like are
Mm,
we becoming parents that just scoop them up, want to wrap them up in cotton wool and be like, oh, I'll solve that problem for you. And of course,
yes.
parenting is the hardest job in the world, but
Sure.
actually, are we really building resilience? Are we listening rather than maybe solving your young person's problem? Maybe it's about listening to them express their problem to then help them figure out how to make it better.
Mm,
I hear all the time, especially I don't know why I mentioned girls earlier, but
yeah.
um, girls arguing with girls, and in schools at the moment that's a huge problem. There's
Right.
lots of girls arguing, and girls argue different to boys. Boys will be upset, maybe they'll have a fight, and then it'll be over. Girls don't argue like that. They will argue, and they will have this low level kind of abuse in a way. They're mean
Right.
to each other, and kids are mean to each other. They say
Mm,
horrible things, and then when there's other people that get involved through, and because it's so easy to kind of add your pennies in when you're just putting a message
yeah.
onto a group, it's kind of like, oh yeah, I can just say that, it won't really hurt, will it? Well,
Yes.
it actually really does hurt. And I think now, with the girls, where they're rowing differently to boys, and how this thing is like, girls seem to be, for now, I don't know why, we haven't figured it out yet, but people are talking about it a lot in all education sectors, why girls are arguing so much at the moment. And it seems to be across years, which is interesting, because normally it would be maybe girls in year 9, upset with
Yeah.
each other, or girls just in year 8. Well, now it could be girls in year 7 all the way up to year 9, or girls in 9 all the way up to year 11, which is interesting. And if
Yeah.
you think about development stages, when we were at school, you wouldn't hang out. A year 11 would not
No,
hang out with a year 7 or even a year
no.
10, probably.
Yeah,
And now they do. It's very much over the years.
right,
And I wonder if that's to do with, emotionally, they say from an emotional intelligence point of view, our young people are about a year and a half beneath their actual age at the moment.
right.
And that's all to do with COVID, really, again. It wasn't meant to be about COVID today at all, but it's interesting when
No,
you
no,
start
but
to
it's
unpick it, how it comes up all
yeah,
the time.
yeah. But it was interesting as well because I just would like to ask this as well because it's like I was recently talking to another gentleman who is a occupational therapist and he works with a lot of young people and again I was really interested because like again from my perspective I'm just hearing the news not firsthand, which I find this is really interesting to corroborates or debunks the headlines, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And I was asking him this thing again about like, oh, what's the impact of young people on with COVID, and one of the things that he was maybe what he'd seen experience was anxiety was there's a lot of young people that when they missed out on those 2 years essentially of being home is like they also missed out on those moments of when um, they would just be in embarrassing situations. So there was
Yeah.
this 2 years of like where they would have been in a moment where like they made a fool of themselves or they fell over or they said the wrong thing in class or
Mm.
someone asked them out, they asked someone else out. Just those moments of
Yeah.
teenage years where
Yeah.
they didn't have those moments of got a knock to
Hmm.
come back from.
Yeah.
And they're now say like especially if they were 16 going in, they're now 18 maybe even going to university, and they've missed out on these 2 crucial years of that development. And now it's like, right, go on, go to uni, live on your own.
Yeah.
And they haven't had those moments because they've, you say, been stuck in a room or trapped, and if anything they've regressed back into those.
Yeah.
Is that something that rings true to you as well?
Absolutely, and I think the part of that bit that I was talking about with the girls, you know, they argue and we can't fix it for them. We're
Yeah.
not 14 having this row with the social media and, dealing with
Yes.
all these emotions, like you said, about being, not as emotionally resilient as perhaps we were, 10 years ago. And our parents try to fix it. It's like, oh, I'm going to ring up the school, I'm going to get them to speak to that person. And it makes it worse. All the young people say it makes it worse, and actually being in school, I think it probably does. I'm not sure it fixes it at all. Even though we're
Mm,
coming from a good place and, all the staff are coming from a really good place, they're trying. But until those girls decide to make friends, nothing's going to change. And is that to do with, like you said, where we've just, been taken away and not had the knock, so we don't know how to deal with that stuff. We look at our parents going, you need to fix this, or they kind of want you
yes.
to, but they kind of don't. And parents try and fix it, they make it worse, and and we're taking away their resilience again, aren't we? That we're just
Mm,
actually not teaching them to build this kind of, oh my goodness, things are going to go wrong sometimes.
mm,
And I often open up talks about with young people, your emotions are going to go up and down. Things are going to go wrong in your life, but if you've got the resilience to build yourself up and allow yourself to cope with that problem and find the answers, then you're winning.
mm,
And I think that's really an important thing to help our young people do, is
mm,
find their way now, in this new
yeah.
world that we're kind of
Yeah.
in now.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I was just chatting to one of my sisters yesterday, and she has um so 4 girls, my nieces, and one of the things I think because we were just chatting about this in general and stuff, and she works in a school and that as well, and so I think one of her girls said she was trying to chat to him about things like this and the whole thing of like, oh, we have to, and she's like trying to say, well, you know, there'll be times when I get nervous, meaning my sister, I get nervous and I get scared and stuff. She's like, oh, even when an adult, even when you're a grown up. So it's this thing again of like the way it's obviously way she's trying to do it, and then other people, it's that sort of demonstration. So I'm interested in the sense of when you're working with young people, but you're also your interaction with then like the whole sort of unit, how do you, because there's this thing of like the expectation of the outcome in a sense of this child is now fixed, solved, doesn't have an issue anymore, and how do the dynamic in a sense, because it's not just the young person, it's their one thing, but there's so many other factors. So I'm interested in your take in a sense of when you look at it more holistically, when you bring in say the parents or the teaching or the whole lot of it.
Yeah, that wonderful word fixed. I just,
Mm,
I want to be fixed. Oh, great.
mm,
Okay. Not sure how
yeah.
we do that. I'm not sure, they sometimes in therapy call it the F word because actually we're never meant to say it because
Yes.
it's just not true.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Even if you were in therapy for years, are you ever really fixed? Because you
Yeah.
could walk out the door and a bus could come near you, and then your brain goes, "Oh gosh, I got nearly run over by a bus." Could that cause an issue? Absolutely, it could.
Yeah.
And that's why, whether it's to do with extended family, as in parents and siblings, and teachers and the society we live in, teaching people to be resilient is without a doubt the way that we fix people, because
Yeah.
we can't make everything right. We can't make it perfect, and I think where they're being impressed by people that show this perfect life, don't they? Which is the other sort of issue that we have with all the social media. Oh, look, I eat this every day, or I go to the gym every day, I do this, and then look at this wonderful life I've got. How often do people really put on the shift, what, I just look terrible this morning, I've got all these spots on my face, I just feel rubbish, I ate a big bowl of chocolate last night, or whatever it might be.
Mm.
That stuff isn't advertised very often, is it?
No.
And when you're a
No.
young person looking at that, sort of aspiring to these people and going, wow, I want to be like that, and then they can't keep it up because
Yeah.
it's not a real life, then they feel like they're failing. And the way the
Yeah.
brain copes with that, then it then starts being, brings on that negative thought process, looking at things in a closed mindset, their amygdala, which, is a huge part of your brain. So we have conscious brain, subconscious brain. Anytime we're under pressure, whether that's being chased by a lion, or whether that's, oh my gosh, I've got GCSEs, or I'm going to fail, or my friends hate me, your amygdala will send out information down to above your kidneys to release cortisol and adrenaline around your body. And often they say we live on this,
Yeah.
it's just running for our body all the time, because until you really relax, until your amygdala goes, oh, you're safe, then you don't, the adrenaline is all there, the cortisol and adrenaline
Mm.
is there, and their heart racing, and then they're breathing, and panic attacks. I'm sure if we went to either of our local hospitals now, there would be 5-10 people having panic attacks in the hospital now, and whatever age they are. And like we sort of started off saying, anxiety is a huge deal, and I think we live on anxiety, this hum of anxiety all the time, and I think children
Mm.
do as well. They're looking, you watch sort of a classroom, and some of them will be watching other people's reactions, just checking out their eyes, making sure, are
Right.
they looking at me, are they talking about me, are they looking at me, and all this stuff that's going on
Right.
in their head all the time. And it's just builds this level of anxiety that I don't think we've seen before, really.
No.
And then, like we said, not having the resilience to deal with that, because they've been kept safer for longer, maybe, or those
Yes.
2 years that were sucked away in those real development areas of their childhood. It's changed all that, so that we definitely have more anxious people, more, and I think that's what's becoming more evident. CAMs are overrun because there's so many people who get to that bit where they are feeling, self-harm and suicidal, because we're not dealing with that low level of anxiety. I'm doing
Mm.
talks now. We did some talks with year 3 and 4, so those children
Wow.
are not 5 and 6, 7 and 8 years old.
Yes.
And when I started doing this 10 years ago, you wouldn't have even thought about
No.
talking to children that age range, because you'd be like, oh, they're all still coping with their emotions, really. But we
Yeah.
are now, trying to give them these things. And we spoke to about 2,000 year 3s and 4s in an area in Berkshire, just because it was like, right. And a school was like, it was a secondary school that said, I had this idea. And it's like, I think it's a brilliant idea. Let's start younger. Let's try to, as they grow up and as they come into the secondary school, then maybe they can be more resilient, and maybe we can help
Yes.
them, become just able to cope with life a little bit better.
Yeah. That is I think that's even more of a surprise statistic or surprise thing than the sort of 1 in 6 to 1 in 3. The fact that going into essentially not even top of primary, that's kind of
Mm.
like beginning of junior primary sort of
Yeah.
level, that you be going in to do some sort of talking about, I'm sure. Are you even, this is a question actually, are you even saying the words like anxiety to those children? You are, like, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's with the year 3 and 4, it's different, obviously,
Yeah.
but I always think knowledge is power, so we're teaching
Yes.
them about their brain, we're
Yes.
teaching them about the specifics, about their amygdala, about what's going on in their body, and using the words like cortisol and adrenaline. And do you ever feel
Right.
that feeling where your breathing changes, whether it's like running for a football, or, what, so we try and, of course, make it not so,
Context.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. But we'll use the words like anxiety. Our children aren't, they're fantastic, amazing, intelligent human
Yeah.
beings. And actually, you don't need to protect them so much.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with anxiety, because
No.
actually sometimes we need it. Sometimes as a human
Yes.
being, we want that surge of adrenaline. If you want to
Yes.
get that, goal in football. I was going to say goal in rugby then, but if you want to
Yeah.
get that try in
Mm.
rugby, or you want to get the goal in football, or you want to do well in an interview, you want a little bit of adrenaline so that
Yes.
you're bringing your A game. And
Yes.
we don't talk to them about these specific things, but by the time they get to year 7, we're talking about eustress, which is our helpful stress, as in that
Yes.
bit that I was just talking about, and we talk about what their bodies feel like when it starts to get out of control, when they're starting to go, oh, I don't like that feeling, because often I think we're like, our young children cry, when they're sort of year 3 and 4, great. If you're crying, that's
Yeah.
fine, have a cry. Not talking about crying all the time, but crying is this wonderful natural way of getting rid of stress hormone in your brain. They've analysed tears, and there is stress hormone in tears, which I'm like going, oh, that's brilliant
Yes.
then, isn't it? Because there's that whole, hey, when you go to secondary school, they're saying, oh, well, if you're a man and you cry, then you're weak. And
Yeah.
it's like such an awful thing that's going around, and as it's been going around for years. And I'm saying, well, actually, if you think about it, if you don't let yourself cry, and that stress hormone that was in your head, that was coming out of your eyes, and you sort of keep it in your body, actually, it's making your body weak. So maybe you're weak if you don't cry. It's like
Mm.
really teaching it from a different perspective and saying, do you really want that stress hormone to be staying inside of you? Actually have a cry. And with year 3 and 4, or even younger, and as parents, I think we're with our children, oh, stop crying, come on, you're fine. But actually, what are we doing even in that sentence? And I mean, I know when my children are young, I definitely have said that to them, and now I look back and go, oh no, I just
Yeah.
think, gosh. But because it's hard being a parent, and children
Yes.
cry, and there's nothing wrong with crying, and actually it's their way of dealing with their emotions, isn't it? And it is a bit about
Yes.
like this building resilience. It's not something that's weak, really. It's about them
No.
showing you that there's something wrong. And so with year 3 and 4, we'll talk about crying, and but we would use the words like
Yeah.
anxiety, because I think it's better to be knowledgeable, and
Yes.
not from a
Y-
scary perspective at all, but
Yes.
this is what's going on in your body.
Yeah.
Let's understand it. Let's see if we can work.
Yeah. Absolutely. And even just in a sense of like the way you're just saying it there, to bring me almost back into myself, in sense of like, it's trying to remove it in a sense of like it to be as if it's a bad word or a shocking thing, in a sense of like that. Because I'm sure, I don't know, I'm assuming here, but I would think there'll be a group of parents sort of who would make them anxious that their child is going to be talked about anxiety, to make so they get this sort of repetitive thing. But that goes back to, again, in the sense of the individual's fear, maybe from a parent, of they don't want the cliche of, you don't want your children to get hurt, or you
Yeah,
don't want to get anything. But it's like, but that is a part of life, in the sense of pain or negative emotions, things that happen or whatever. We're going to feel those sorts of things. So if there's never been any sort of a negative experience, then absolutely, when they're going to get to those, and then suddenly get to a point where they may be even not even 18, 16, and then there's this expectation of, now, well, no, you're 16 now,
mm,
you should, quote, should be
yeah,
behaving in this way. But if they've never had the opportunity, experience to, again, that word you say, of build up resilience from failure, quote
mm,
unquote, or just something not going their way,
yeah,
then I don't know that they won't be in a position at 16 to be able to do it. And also, when you think back now, you said it earlier when you were like, oh, the thing of feeling an adult at 25, like I'm 40 and I'm still working it out, like, so it's when you reflect back and you go, God, it's so young, like it really is. And like the pressure, I can't imagine the pressure now of being a sort of 16 to 18-year old. I really can't. Sort of that expectation of it being so visual for everyone. Like if like I'd almost get sort of like worried now of the things that me and my mates did when we were that age. If it was on video, you
yeah,
even now, and they say whatever, that's nearly
yeah.
whatever 25 years ago, you'd be kind of like, wow.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think we all want to protect our children, and we all want to protect our young people, but it's impossible,
Yes.
and actually anxiety is not a scary word.
No.
Actually, I wonder what's scarier is if, you feel this emotion and you're going, whoa, what is going on? Why do I feel this? Why is this happening to my body? Mum, like
Yeah.
It's horrible. And even if we protected our young people, they would still feel anxious. Imagine even wrapping them up in cotton wool and putting them in a box and, that sounds awful, but keeping them safe completely from as much as we could. They then feel anxious that they're not with people or, what's happening or, so anxiety absolutely is a normal emotion. And I wish we had magic wands, and I say this to people, I wish I had a magic wand and I could take away all your negative emotion now. I can't, and that's because our brains are so well developed and we're, this wonderful species that actually can do lots of things and have all these wonderful thought patterns. But what comes with that is the negativity of the emotion as well,
Yeah.
and actually we've got to learn to deal with that emotion. And if we can learn to deal with it, then it's not scary anymore because we understand what's going on. And that's why I always think knowledge is power,
Yeah.
like actually giving these children and the young people evidence about their brain, like this is what's going on. Then it's like, oh, okay, I understand now why my heart is racing, why my breathing's changed, because of this adrenaline that's going around my body, because I looked at that message and went, oh no, they're going to hate me, those sort of things. It then gives them reason. They're like, okay, so if I know if I can control this by rationalizing that thought, or even if I get the anxiety peak and then be like, right, hold on a minute, do I want my body to feel like this? Is this the way I want it to be? And then being able to look at it rationally, because as soon as our amygdala sends out all this stuff, your subconscious brain's in charge, which means we haven't got our clever stuff even to deal with that difficulty anyway. You think we all go in, if we were in an accident or something, we're in shock, aren't we? And we lose the ability to think rationally. It's like, it's just that protection at that moment. I just want to survive. I just want to allow myself to be okay. And like you said, I often say I'm so glad that there was no videos when I was a kid, because to think of an interview now, me going for a job, then putting my name into Google and things that we've been children, and things coming
Oh
up, and
God,
you think, my gosh, I'm so glad that nothing was ever, there was no phones, there was no evidence, there
No.
is, and those young people now have to deal with that,
Do with that. Yeah.
other
That's
people filming them, or
yeah.
being involved in something, and I
Yeah.
think it's really difficult.
Yeah. Um, I mean, we've spoken obviously a lot about the young people in the sense of maybe what they're experiencing. I'd like to know a little bit more. You said a few of the things you do. I'd love to learn a bit more about what the company, especially you created, what you actually do and how you actually help the young people that you try to work with.
Great. So we're called BRYIM, like I said, Building Resilience in Young Minds. And we're on Instagram and stuff, so please come and follow us, brym.uk. And always on there, we're putting things that we're doing, but also, anxiety busting techniques, really, I guess, and different knowledge about the brain and things like that. So it's good. So the plan is we have a one-to-one program. So that's a 7-week, half an hour a week program for young people. We either deliver that in schools. We now are in lots of schools, so they know that they want to support their young people. We go in, we work with a young person so it's basically half a term really, giving them the resilient skills and then saying, right, go and try and use them now, see what happens. Go and be in life and let's see if we can build that resilience, which is what I like, because, like I said, they change so quick. If you can give them these skills and then say, right, go on then, let's go and practice it, go and see what happens. Of course, if they need to come back and chat with us a couple of times or something later on, then great, that's fine, but just try it first. So that's one of our things. We also, all my therapists do that outside of school hours. So we've got clinics where we can support people, parents ring us up or people hear about us doing a good job in school and then they ring us. So we've got outside therapy, individual support too.
Yeah.
We also support parents, as in, oh my gosh, I can't get my child to do this. What do I do? So they can come for therapy. And because we've all been ex-teachers in the company, we understand how schools work. And like you said, if you haven't been in the education sector, then it's different, and schools change all the time. So, helping parents understand how to build that resilience in their children and how to cope with that. I can't get my teenagers to do anything. They're going to fail all their exams or all that kind of stuff, all of their worries, I guess. That's another part of it. In schools then we do the 7-week program, but we also do talks to tutor groups. So in lots of our schools we'll go, every child in that school throughout the school year will see us in some format, whether that's a one-to-one or whether that's a group session, talking about anxiety, talking about, the things that happen in different years, whether in year 7, settling into secondary school, year 6, that transition of going up to secondary school, like we're saying, year 3 and 4, talking about anxiety, talking about resilience, talking about what their emotions are like, what does it feel like, kind of, I guess, connecting them with their body really and understanding what's going on. Year 8 and year 9, sort of self-harm stuff, that kind of understanding themselves and And again, it's a fact, young people they've got access to everything. If you said self-harm to a young person who's probably 13, 14, they'll know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's, they just know, and they probably
Yeah.
will know one of their friends that's doing it, to be honest.
Yeah.
So we just think knowledge is power. Come from a place where you
Sure.
understand, not, of course, not to promote it, but
No.
just talking about it and talking about,
Sure.
some people use this as a coping mechanism, but we can give you more healthy coping mechanisms to do it differently and
Yeah.
deal with those emotions differently. Then by the time we get up to year 10 and 11, it's all about GCSE and, how to cope with that pressure and the stress of having all this work to do and not really wanting to do it.
Yeah.
And then A level again, the big wild world. Oh, what are we going to do? And failing and, failing at life and how to manage that really and kind of giving
Yeah.
yourself
I mean,
positive things to
yeah.
do with it really.
I'm interested as well, though, in a sense of like, because this is in a sense of a lot of the people I talk to through this podcast, or people I've just talked to, I'd work with privately, is thing is like, and it's probably going to be even more evident for any young person coming into it now. It's not to dismiss the importance of the exams and education and even going to university, because I still think the benefits are there.
Yeah,
Great. But
I agree.
you and myself and so many of the people now are the perfect examples of how the world of work has changed and how the world of work will continue to change, in a sense
Yep.
of, you were a teacher 25 years and then you decided, actually, I'm now going to set up my own business. I
Yep.
was in the insurance industry. That's what
Yeah.
I did. I was talking to people about life assurance policies,
Yeah.
shifted and pivoted to, into the well-being space as a coach and personal development, that sort of stuff. So, I'm interested in a sense when you're trying to talk through these people, that very pressured time, especially that A level going into university time,
Yeah.
of it will change. You can change the whole thing. If you can change your mind, you could do your
Yeah.
degree and then go, are people still kind of worried in a sense of like, oh, what am I going to do for a job? Or, that sort of thing. I'm interested in the sense of that perspective when you're talking to people that age.
They definitely still are. How often have we all said to our children at like 5, "Oh, what do you want to be?" I
Yeah.
love it. There's a wonderful quote by someone that says, my teacher asked me what I wanted to be, and I said happy, and they said, "Oh, no, no, do you want to be a fireman or a policeman or?" And he said, "No, I want to be happy." And the teacher said to the young person, "Oh, I think you've misunderstood the question," and they said, "No, I think you misunderstood life." And I'm
Yeah.
like, "That's a brilliant thing, isn't it?"
Yeah.
But it's pressure to
Yeah.
become an accountant or a lawyer or a policeman, or to know, how do you ever know when you're
Yeah.
14 or 16
Yeah.
or even 18 or even 25 what you want to
Absolutely.
do with your life? I
Yeah.
think I tell young people, so now statistically they reckon that the young people now, as they go through their age range, through the years, they probably have 4 different careers.
Yeah.
As is when we were young, I think I'm much older than you, but 2 years was unusual. You go back
Yeah.
another 60 sort of years and people would be in the same career for the whole of their
Yeah.
lifetime, would they? And that was just, so things are developing. And who would have thought when we were young that people could make so much money out of YouTube? It was
Yeah.
never even thought of.
Yeah.
So there will be jobs out there that will happen
Yeah.
as we see society, as we see these years go on, that aren't even
Yeah.
imagined yet.
Yeah.
And I think as a parent or as an adult to be like, there's no pressure to
Yeah.
decide what you want to do.
Yeah.
How about you just go and find out some interesting information? And of course,
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think universities are fantastic place to grow as a human being.
Yeah.
But does it have to be, oh, you're going to go into university to become an accountant? What about go to university to learn, just to
Yeah.
explore and just to get your brain to go, oh wow, look, I could think about that and I could think about this, and to widen your,
Mm.
horizons, your brain,
Yeah.
whatever. I think, there could be so much better ways of selling it than
Yeah.
it's just about a job,
Yeah.
because I think
Yeah.
that's when it makes it so much pressure,
Yeah.
doesn't it? Because
Yeah.
then they're like, oh,
Yeah. And I think then on the converse side of that, in a sense of like, if you don't want to go, that's
yeah,
cool too.
yeah, of course.
It's that thing of like, if you want to get to a point and think, oh, actually, you just want to either get into a place of work or get into do
Yeah,
something else. I see there's like, this is a slight tangent, like, but I was last year or about a year or so ago, I was doing huge sort of renovations on my house, and I had the only way we could kind of work it was we had the builder in, and then I was the dog's body, or the temporary builder and that.
yeah,
And then we had the various trades coming in. I wasn't doing plumbing or electrics. And it's an interesting thing in a sense of like the world of sort of work, or the world of occupation and stuff, for things like these sort of, and the every sort of occupation has its value and its level, and people like, there's still this sort of, I don't know, this class potential look of thinking like of trades and things, and it's like it's this thing of like it was like 7 months or so I was doing it. It was such hard work, but it was such good crack. They were such good fun, beyond skilled in what they do, and earning a really,
Yeah,
good living. And it's kind of
absolutely.
like there's so many different, being able to step back and perspective and go, you can do whatever it is that you
Yeah,
want. and
absolutely.
and I think, but again, that comes back to that point again of the saying earlier, that resilience of, oh, but if I don't do this, what will people say? Or if I
Yeah,
do this, what will people say?
yeah,
Versus to be able to have that the resilience been over those years, it's like, well, I'm doing it and I'm happy. And that going back to
yeah,
the thing is like, and I'm happy
yeah,
doing it.
yeah. I totally agree. I think, it that education bit is like, oh, what are you going to do next? What are you going to do next? What are you going to do next? Do you know what? Lots of people don't know, and
Yeah,
you're absolutely right. Having a trade is so fantastic, and for lots of people, they've got wonderful lives out of that. And
massive.
you look at the benefits. If you're outside, you're not sat down all day. I mean, all the benefits from a human perspective is brilliant, isn't it? Really,
Yeah.
and I think actually really giving people the power to say you can choose.
Yes.
Literally let yourself decide what you want to do. And if you choose wrong, as in you decide 3 years down the line it's not quite for you, that's okay. You can
Yeah.
change it. And if
Exactly.
things go wrong, as in you fail an exam, or you don't quite go down that pathway, do you know what? You can change it, and you can retake that exam, or you can allow yourself to go on a different route and get there anyway. So it's never
Yeah.
the end. And I think that's what we're all like, oh, if failure is such a bad thing. Failure isn't a bad thing. Once you
Yeah.
fail, it actually gives you, as long as you figure out how to make it better, then it's a wonderful thing, because you're
Yeah.
again building resilience, aren't you?
Yeah.
You're literally
Absolutely.
allowing yourself to make those mistakes and change it. And I think
Absolutely.
if we can, that thing about building that in all throughout their lives, knowing
Yes.
we don't have to make it right all the time. We don't have to. Children are going to get it wrong, and when they get it wrong, that's okay. How come? How do you think you can do that differently next time? Or, and that's all about going, oh yeah, actually, I could try and do that, couldn't I? Or,
Yeah.
and helping them come up with their ways of making it different.
Absolutely. You shared one, that sort of the quote, or it was more the story there. I'm always interested about quotes when I talk to people. It's something that does fascinate me. Are there any other sort of quotes or phrases that you quite like or are important to you?
There's quite a rude poem
Go for it.
that I quite like. It's by Philip Larkin. Let me basically it's called "They Fuck You Up, They Do," and it's all about parents. And it sort of basically says, you can look it up. So it's Philip Larkin. It's a very famous poem, but it says they fuck you up, they do. Our parents are messed up with their own shit, and then they pass them on just for you, kind of thing. And it goes along
Yeah.
that vein of just like, whatever our messes are, we give them to our children. And then the end of the poem is like, so get out quick, don't have any yourself, kind of thing. It's
Yeah.
like, it's just, I kind of like it, because I just think, you know, I think probably in our children, they do take on our anxieties and our like desires and our, oh, I failed at this, I'm going to help you do better at that. Or I don't know how to do this, you're going to, oh, all those worries. And then they've got their own as well. And it's like, whoa, going through life like that. So yeah, I quite like that poem because
That's
of the,
hilarious. And I
well,
think it's funny, like, because it is that thing of like there is a point in your when you get to whether it could be to do with age, or it's probably more in a sense of, I think, when you get to a certain point in your life of um full acceptance and accountability for who you are, and you kind of go, you know what, they were doing their best,
yeah,
I'm trying to do my best,
yeah,
and that is all we can do.
I
And
totally agree.
for better or worse, but and it's kind of that thing of like, yeah, they probably did, and I probably am as well in some respects,
Yeah,
but I'm trying to
trying
do
to
what
the
I
best.
can. Yeah.
And that bit you said then about self-acceptance, that's what it's all about, isn't it?
Yeah,
We've all
completely.
got we've all got the cracks. We've all got the things
Yep.
that aren't so great. But if you can accept it and you can acknowledge it, and you can be like, do you know what? This is me. And actually
Yes.
this is okay. And I'm
Yeah.
okay with that, then that gives you the ultimate power,
Yeah.
to
Completely.
whether you succeed or not, whether you make the right choices or not, it's okay, because you're trying your best, and that's all we can do.
Yeah. Absolutely. Um, would you say that has there already been any sort of real big influences in your either in your life, whether it be throughout your life or more recently with the business, whether it be private or public eye?
I mean, yeah, I've had lots of influence in my life. I mean, first, my mum is like this inspirational woman who basically was like, she's very positive, very, you can do anything. Believe in
Mm.
yourself. Really, you can do anything. And I love that whole thought,
Mm.
and and of course there was some shit there as well, no
Yeah.
life's perfect. But I love that whole thing of like, do you know what, you can really can. She's 75, learning about different courses, never stop learning, just, she's amazing. She's done a
Yeah.
degree, she's done a master's, she's done she's still learning, doing all these amazing things. And I love that, because I think actually if you can keep with society, you can keep learning, then your
Yeah.
brain's going to keep developing, and that's really great. To become a therapist, I've had lots of people along the way who've inspired me, and just like, I want to do that. I really want to make things better. I want to
Mm.
work with people to really, I don't know, change the way young people are. I also
Yeah.
teach people to become hypnotherapists. So anyone out there who
Okay.
wants to be a hypnotherapist, we've got a wonderful course in Reading that's at the Royal Berkshire College of Clinical Hypnosis. It's excellent, and it's all about the brain. It's all about kind of accepting yourself, I guess. Understanding
Yeah.
your little wobbly bits and your little notches
Yeah.
and all those ouchies, kind of thing. And it's wonderful. So if anyone's interested in that, please get in touch.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's been lots of people along the way. I mean, yeah, and I guess, to be honest, my children as well, like
Mm.
their minds, their that purity of having a young baby born, and it's just like, whoa,
Yeah.
and how what you watch that brain, that body, that everything develop into those fantastic personalities of just, I think it's inspiring, it's inspiring
Yeah.
to try and get it right, and I guess it's inspiring to really help them. And there's
Yeah.
been lots of young people on the way from a teaching perspective, of people that I've
Yes.
been like, yeah, that's really cool. When you
Yeah.
walk away going, you're amazing. Even with
Yeah.
all that adversity and all that stuff you've got to go with, you can turn around and do that. Then I am like, wow, I'm in
Yeah.
awe of you. So I
Yeah.
just think, yeah, there's been lots of people. I can't really
Yeah.
pick out.
No. But even what I love there more is in the sense of, one, it can be the people, but sometimes it's the characteristics of those people.
Yeah,
It's the sort of, or the impact that they've made, and they say, or maybe the adversity that they've overcome, or the those little things. So it's sometimes it's not necessarily the person, it's the what they've portrayed or what they've put out there. That's let's say the inspiring thing.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I have one more question for you, Charlie, which is, what's important for your future?
My future. So I have this wonderful grand plan of, of BRYM being in every school in the country, 48,000 schools, and there's a BRYM person in every school. Like my desire would be that we are producing young people that can cope with whatever life is thrown at them, whether
Yeah.
it is COVID, whether it is a financial crisis, whether it is, I don't know what job I'm going to have,
Yeah.
just dealing with life, dealing with their body, dealing with their brain, dealing with their emotions, so that they can be a success, and that they can feel, like I said, that whole quote, they can feel happy, and they can, they're never going to feel happy all the time, but they know that they can facilitate themselves to feel happy. So that's my desire of the world, to put it out there, going, every school has a lovely little BRYM sticker or a little BRYM person in there,
Yeah.
going, right, we can know how to make things a little bit better.
That's amazing. I love it. It's been absolutely wonderful to chat to you, Charlie. I really appreciate your time. I know you mentioned it before, but I would love to give you people to support you for sure, and to connect you. So we will make sure any links that are all shared in the notes. But if you want to give again another shout out now, just to remind people where they can connect and follow you online.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So we are www.BRYM, BRYYM.uk, dot com.
Co.uk.
Let me
Oh,
get
dot
it
com.
right. And here you go. You can see one of our little, this is us,
Yeah,
BRYM. So we're
brilliant.
www.brym.co.uk, and I can read it on the back as well, which also means I don't have to get it wrong, does it? On Instagram, then we are brym.uk, and then we're on Twitter and everything. You can find us from those
Yeah,
links in there, though. So
brilliant.
BRYM is Building Resilience in Young Minds. And then the college I was talking about, where we train people to be hypnotherapists, which, like I said, is just fab. That's the Royal Berkshire College of Clinical Hypnosis. So it's www.rbcch.com.
Fantastic.
Yeah, thanks for putting in the notes. That'd be
Yeah.
amazing. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
absolutely. So those links will be in the notes. So if you want to be able to connect and follow, and if you're in the education system in the UK, you'd have to check out to BRYM. I'm sure it would be a massive benefit to your school, or anywhere if your children are even going there, it'd be something to
Yeah,
raise with them. Once again, Charlie, I really appreciate you joining me today. Thank you
no
so
problem
much.
at all. Thank you so much for having me. It's been really lovely chatting to you.
Thanks. Thank you for listening to What's Important to You. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, comment, and share. And make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Again, you can follow me at James Dean Coaching on Facebook and Instagram. Connect with me on LinkedIn or find out more about me on jamesdeancoaching.com.